Welcome to the DigiGods podcast. Wade Major, along with...
I'm here for one more week, Tim Cox Show.
And Mark will be back next week and will give us all the details of his wonderful, wonderful vacation and what it was like to be in France when everything went down in Nice. It's shaping up to be an interesting summer. Feature-wise, I find the failure of a lot of live-action films, notably Tarzan and
Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters did okay,
it's
actually.
Okay, but not great.
But it was, didn't open number one. Didn't open number one.
May not be another one.
It's not going to go up. It's not going to go up next week.
And the X-Men film didn't do so great, and Batman and Superman. It's really shaping up to be. It's the animated films that are just killing it this year. Zootopia and Dory.
Finding Dory, most money of any animated film. That
Crazy.
blows me away, dude. That the original film,
Ice
16
Age?
years. Ice Age comes out.
16
years ago, that original film. And Finding Dory makes $460 some odd million over the course of 2 weeks or 3 weeks in release.
Yeah, my daughter's nuts for Dory. It is. It's just a.
Those are all the better films. Zootopia, best film I've seen this year.
Oh, absolutely. Zootopia is amazing. Zootopia is a fantastic film. Yeah, it's a weird year that way. It'll be interesting to see how things wrap up at the end. Anyway, you know what? Let's jump right in. We've got some docs to talk about, we're going to have. You know what? Actually, here's what I'm going to do right at the top of the show. We've got an interview that's going to go along with some stuff that we're going to be talking about later on in the show. But we've got a cool little giveaway that I want to offer to our listeners. We have 5 of these to give away. These are NewerTech lightning cables. They are half a meter long, each of them. And if you've got an iPhone, if you've got anything that you need an Apple lightning cable for, go ahead and email us at gods@digigods.com. Just send us an email at gods@digigods.com. And 5 lucky people who put the word lightning in the title, in the subject line, will be chosen at random to receive a half-meter long, very cool lightning cable. You're going to get whatever color you get. We only have 5 different colors. We got green, red, blue, white, and black. So if you don't mind just getting one of those colors at random, then go ahead and email us, gods@digigods.com, lightning in the subject line. We got these from NewerTech. NewerTech provides a lot of really fun stuff to us, and every time a holiday of some kind rolls around, we get these great offers from cool things from NewerTech. And they just make a lot of really fun stuff just for your home electronic hub, connecting all of your stuff. There's always interesting things, little keyboards and keypads and all kinds of fun electronic gizmos. NewerTech's a really great company. So they were kind enough to furnish us some lightning cables to send to some of our listeners. So half-meter long lightning cables, high quality. They got that woven outer skin on them so they don't crack and they don't break, and these things will last forever. So send us lightning in the subject line to gods@digigods.com, and you're going to get either green, red, blue, white, or black. That's what you're going to get. All right, Tim, we're going to have an interview later on in the show as well.
Who are we talking to?
And you'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out.
It relates to one of the films that we're talking about. And if people who frequent the Facebook page will probably know. They're probably already ahead of us. So on the doc front, this is maybe my favorite documentary of last year. It floored me. I thought it was amazing and absolutely dazzling. The Russian Woodpecker. This is the filmmaker is Chad Gracia. Or Gracia, but the story is mind-blowing. It centers on Fedor Alexandrovich, who is a really eccentric Ukrainian artist. And here's his story. He was born around the time of Chernobyl, and he had developmental disabilities because of his mother being irradiated from Chernobyl residually during her pregnancy. And he becomes obsessed, and he's a very interesting artist, and he's very obsessive and weird and eccentric, but he becomes obsessed with unraveling the mystery of Chernobyl. And all of this is against the backdrop of the recent turmoil in Ukraine, where Russia was they seized the Crimea, and then they were fomenting rebellion on the border with Russia after that whole governmental turnaround, change of president, throwing the old guy out, putting the new guy in, all that stuff. And this becomes an extraordinary mystery because there's this giant antenna array near Chernobyl that is allegedly different from Chernobyl. That exists for no reason. And it used to, the reason this is called the Russian woodpecker is that for a long time, this thing was sending this woodpecker-sounding noise over the North Pole and pounding North America with this woodpeckery sound, this giant radar array. And people are thinking, okay, is this some kind of cyber attack, this like a radio attack? What is this? And it's this weird mystery that centers around Russian politics and his birth and Chernobyl and modern politics, and the way that this all devolves. At a certain point, you think this is the craziest conspiracy theory I've ever heard, and by the end of this thing, you think, son of a bitch, he's right. He figured it out. It's like a giant detective thing. It's rather extraordinary. It's one of the most amazing docs I have seen in years, and I thought it was the best documentary of last year. Did not get an Oscar nomination. The other Ukrainian doc, the much more conventional one, did, but this is superb, and it was a big hit at Sundance, and it's called The Russian Woodpecker, and it absolutely has to be seen to be believed. It's amazing.
I've got a documentary here called The Fear of 13. I did see this one as well, spellbinding film. Just notice this. A guy's been on death row for 23 years. This guy's been on death row for 23 years. These filmmakers go in and sit down with him, and he tells them his story. He's just telling the actual factual story. There's a disclaimer at the top of this film where the filmmakers tell us that everything that this guy is about to tell us in this film, they have already gone and verified as factually true. So what they're saying to you is, as you begin to watch this film, do not concern yourself with whether or not anything that you hear this guy say is true or not. We've already looked, we've verified it all. Know that everything that he says is true, and the reason why we have to tell you this, because you're not going to believe a goddamn word of this, because it sounds insane, but it's all true, we promise you. This guy, interesting thing, sentenced to death for rape and murder, whole complicated story. At one point, he requested that his sentence be expedited. Not only was his sentence not expedited, he slipped the noose completely, and why and how and all of that. You just got to sit down and watch the movies. Despite the disclaimer and everything, you're still not going to believe a word of it.
That's amazing.
But it's all true. The Fear of 13.
And then we have an activism doc here called Rising Tides from Cinema Libre. And this is effectively kind of it's not a climate change doc per se. It's more about coastal erosion combined with the rise of sea levels because of climate change. Regardless of where you stand on the political divide of that, the issue of coastal erosion is a pretty legit one, and is really interesting. And there's certainly some stuff in here that people can argue about and debate about, and whether or not it's being properly presented. But it's a pretty compelling doc, and Cinema Libre always releases fairly compelling stuff. It very well shot, very well put together. A lot of important data here. You get bombarded at times with it. A lot of science and stuff from people with nonprofits and experts and engineers and whatnot. So you do kind of get hit with a lot of information, but it's worth watching. It's definitely worth watching. Worth being aware of. Certainly the fact that a lot of these details exist. So that is called Rising Tides.
Got a little documentary here. It's more or less a biopic. Yulom's Cure. It's a film about a guy named Irvin D. Yulom. He's a psychotherapist, a fairly old fellow who's been working as a psychotherapist for many years, has written some absolutely extraordinary books. And this is, in fact, a biopic about him, but it's really about what he's come to understand about the human mind. Now, we get into a whole lot of stuff here that has to do with his life and his philosophy and some of the things that he lived through, but what he's really talking about here is neuroscience, and it's quite fascinating. People know people. I think it was who was it? Dr. Oliver. I forget what his name is. He died not too terribly long ago. And a few very important neuroscience scientists. Neuroscience is making leaps and bounds. What we're coming to know about the way the mind works, and this guy has really put some of it together. This is only 74 minutes long, and mostly it's in Hebrew, and with English subtitles. Yalom's Cure.
Very nice. Here's one from PBS. Saudi Arabia uncovered this is a frontline doc. They call it a rare, revealing look inside the Saudi kingdom. It is certainly compelling, that is for sure. And as far as I'm concerned, it's 60 minutes. It is not nearly long enough. You need like 3 hours to really, really get into this. I actually know a shocking amount for a film critic about the history of Saudi Arabia. Kind of an obsession of mine. It goes with being an obsessive about Lawrence of Arabia. You become obsessed with the movie, then the movie leads you to an obsession about the subject matter of the movie. In any case, but yeah, it is. This has a lot of. I mean, we don't think of Saudi Arabia as being a country like North Korea where we have to smuggle footage in and smuggle it out. I mean, I know people who've worked in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
We can go, we can fly in, we can fly out.
I was stationed in Saudi Arabia in 1981, I think.
So we don't think of them as being like North Korea, but once you're there. It is. Yeah. It is an incredibly closed and repressive and psychotic place.
It is the Kingdom of Saud.
Oh, and if you don't understand that Saudi is about the family that runs it, a family that has run it for or the better part of that peninsula for over 300 years, and essentially the entire peninsula since they conquered the rest of it in about 1924. In any case, this is a chilling look at the efforts of activists in Saudi Arabia to try to change it. It's a fascinating thing to look at because I just was on Film Week recently, as you were, but talking about a movie about a Chinese activist who faces many of the same things. And at a certain point, it just dawns on you: most of the world, we're kind of spoiled. Yeah. Most of the world is not. Most of the world is not the countries that get to buy their Blu-rays and their DVDs and complain that it's region coded. Most of them don't get anything that they want, and they have to smuggle their food in and out. And it's we don't live in a friendly planet.
Yeah, we're a little delusional here in the West about the nature of government and what that word even means.
It's very true. So Saudi Arabia Uncovered is a hell of a frontline doc. Needed to be longer though. And then King George. Is from MPI. This is not about King George. This is about the owner of a restaurant named Georges Perrier, who is known as King George. And effectively, this is there's a drama that goes on here with King George and his restaurant, and he's a very famous guy, and it's a very famous restaurant, and it's in Philadelphia. For those, it's not actually in France. It's a Philadelphia restaurant, and our good friend Robert Abele from LAFCA is quoted on the back of the box, which is nice. I agree with what Robert says about it: poignant, funny, and well-seasoned portrait of autumnal fervor. That's very Bob. It just doesn't have a pun in it, but this is shot over the course of 3 years. And it gets into it's much more interesting than any of those restaurant shows where you're sort of wondering whether or not they'll keep the restaurant open and everything's all done reality show style. This is a really interesting process, and it's worth checking out, especially if you've ever watched Top Chef. Nicholas Elmy, who's on Top Chef, he's in this as well, and it gives you an insight into the culinary world and restaurants and the ins and outs of it that you will not soon forget. I will leave you with that.
Rabin's last day. In November of 1995, Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated.
Yeah,
at the end of a political rally, killed by a deeply observant Jew. It has been said that with that assassination, all hope for resolving the Palestinian-Israeli problem was lost, and certainly it was certainly lost for the last 20 plus years. That's a fact. This film, this documentary, is about the last 2 or 3 days in Rabin's life, and it goes over who it was that assassinated him, a young, very observant Jewish man, and how that assassination more or less destroyed the Israeli left and brought to power the hawks.
It did.
That are still in power to this day, including Benny Netanyahu and a few others. So, every now and again we run across some really interesting films that speak to the sort of history of the Israeli-Palestinian. Also, this is a very interesting one, a pivotal moment in the history of that period.
And then the last doc here. Oh, I think you got one more.
I got one more.
You got one more. So our second to last. This is Strange and Familiar: Architecture on Fogo Island. This is from First Run Features. Really interesting. Documentary docs always compel me. I find them just fascinating. Or architecture docs, I should say. Architecture docs always really I find fascinating. This is about an hour long, and it's all about Fogo Island, which is this little tiny island up off of Canada's Newfoundland coast. And the economy of this island is very, very fragile. So, fishing is drying up, or there's a bad season, or whatever it is. So this architect named Todd Saunders gets to work with an investor named Zita Cobb, and they are going to try to build a very unique sort of hotel on the coastline of Fogo Island. That has extraordinary kind of vision, and then winds up having these even more extraordinary impacts afterwards in terms of sustainability and environmental integration and all. It's really quite fascinating. So it's the whole process of architecture, not just in terms of design, but in terms of how architecture becomes a tool of addressing social change and economic and environmental change. It's all really a fascinating process. So anyway, Marcia Connolly and Catherine Knight are the directors. Strange and Familiar: Architecture on Fogo Island.
And I have a Black Jacket here, an interesting doc, particularly apropos given some of the circumstances that we're in today. This is about a young former Black Panther who leads a 16-week gang intervention course in South Central Los Angeles, right? Involves the city council and the police department. Just today, I believe The Game, big hip-hop guy, The Game, and a couple of weeks ago, Snoop Dogg, too, had another one of these sort of intervention things where these folks came together with the police department, community members, to talk and figure these things out. This guy's been doing this for a number of years now. It's a 16-week course. He walks through the history of the community, the history of the people in the community, the history of the people juxtaposed to the police in the community.
Outstanding.
And everybody just sort of work. This is a very powerful documentary. This is one of those kind of docs where you have these people from opposite sides of everything in the room, and they all, in fact, do get to screaming and yelling at each other. But he will not let these people out of this room, and he's a big brother, so he will not let these people out of this room until they've screamed it all out, and they can walk out of that room feeling better about each other and themselves than they did when they walked in. That might be one of the ways to get at some of this business. Just get it out of your system, get it said, and then let it go. Anyway, it's a pretty powerful documentary, particularly in the context of some things today. The Black Jacket, directed by a fellow named Ryan Simon.
Fascinating. All right, and I got some foreign films here, and then we're going to get into classic films and our interview this week. We got a lot of stuff from Cohen, and this is one of the more eccentric ones that Cohen has picked up lately. Full disclosure, Tim and I have done commentary work for Cohen, and I actually did a couple of them recently. Rams is this really crazy, freaky Icelandic movie about a couple of sheep-herding brothers who've been estranged for decades, who are sort of forced back together when there's this disease outbreak among the sheep and the rams. It's called Rams, appropriately, and it is every bit as cool and weird and eccentric as you expect of Icelandic movies. If you have any familiarity with Icelandic movies, they are unlike anything else. They are really, really unhinged. And great stuff. So definitely check that out. That's on Blu-ray. And then a French thriller here with Gilles Lelouch, who is one of my new favorite actors. He's been around a little while, but if you saw him in The Connection, which was my favorite.
That was so good.
That was amazing. It was my favorite film of, was it last year? I guess it was my favorite film of last year. It was earlier last year. My favorite film of last year, which he's in with Jean Dujardin. He plays the bad guy, this drug-dealing guy in the 1970s, late 70s in France. Anyway, Gilles Lelouch, great actor. Here he basically plays a guy who exposes banking fraud and winds up on the wrong side of the wrong people. It's a good thriller. French thrillers are a lot more intelligent than American thrillers. A lot fewer guns and more cerebral kind of engaging of the Anyway, that's really good. That's on DVD. And then a couple here from Maurice Pialat, whose collection they have been steadily releasing at Cohen as well. We have Volume 2 and Volume 3 from the Maurice Pialat collection, the films of Maurice Pialat. Volume 2 is the first of two films that we're going to be talking about today that actually won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. The other one, which Tim's got over there, which is one of my favorite films ever made.
Best Intentions to Billy August.
It was just amazing. Anyway, the first one here is the Maurice Pialat film Under the Son of Satan, which was incredibly controversial because Pialat went up, and he died soon after. He went up to the podium, and in accepting his award, he says, "Le cinéma est mort. Film is dead."
Film is dead.
And people just booed him. And they hated the film, too. A lot of people really hated the film. But it is a really, really good film, in my opinion. I just think people had a hard time sort of wrestling with it. Gérard Depardieu and Sandrine Bonnaire is an incredible tandem. Depardieu, of course, plays a priest, and I won't tell you exactly what the relationship in the film is. It's just you just know that you will be sitting there and you will be seeing two amazing actors under the direction of an incredible director give a Tour de France, because the Tour de France, Tour de Force performance. And then the other one is Van Gogh, starring Jacques Dutronc. It's a question of whether there are really only three films about Van Gogh that are sort of any good. There's the original Lust for Life with Kirk Douglas, as Van Gogh. And then there is Vincent and Theo, the Altman film. And then there is Pialat's Van Gogh with Jacques Dutronc. And those are the only Van Gogh films really worth checking out. I just think this is a beautiful, beautiful film. It is. It's not entirely faithful to the historical events. If you're looking for that gory moment where Van Gogh slices his ear off, it's not in here. Yeah. That doesn't happen anywhere in this movie. But it is a wonderful, beautiful, very sensitive biopic, and really very incredibly well done. 160 minutes, by the way. It's a long one, but it is. It's just beautiful in every respect.
I'm going to leave Best Intentions for you, the Billy August film. Yeah. But I did want to talk about my golden days because I had a chance to write about it a little bit earlier on our De Plachens film, which is a kind of a prequel to My Sex Life, a 1992 film that he did about Paul Daedalus, same character, Paul Daedalus, being played by the same actors, and it's really a neat little film. You don't have to have seen My Sex Life to enjoy this film, but if you have seen My Sex Life, you will enjoy this film all the more. He tells a number of stories in this film that actually go back to before the events of the things that happened in My Sex Life, when he's an even younger man than he is in that movie, which makes a lot of things that happen in My Sex Life make that much worse. It's basically the story of Paul Daedalus and his involvement with his first girlfriend, who he's with for a number of years in that movie, and he breaks up with her in that movie. When you watch this movie, you get to understand why he breaks up with her so coolly in that movie, which is a movie that was actually shot and takes place 25 years before this movie. It's a really sort of neat thing to sort of watch them all together there. So check that out if you get a chance. Feature special features, conversation with the director, the casting session, a couple of wonderful young actors in this movie playing the characters that appeared in the first movie from 1992. Excellent stuff here. So check this one out if you get a chance.
Arnaud Desplechin, great guy. Okay, and before we get to the best intentions, quick mention of a Strand release on DVD only, not Blu-ray, Sworn Virgin. Great performances by Laura Bispori and Alba Rohrwacher.
I thought it was pretty good too. Yeah, that's a good history.
It's a fascinating film. It's an Italian film, but it's got a whole Albanian angle to it. And the idea here is, if you didn't know this, there is a weird tradition in Albania where women can actually legally become men. This is not like a transgender thing. This is a cultural tradition where you simply sort of declare
You
yourself.
make a declaration
You make
publicly.
a public declaration that you're going to live as a man, and you have to take an oath of celibacy. You will now never marry, never have sex. It's a complete oath of virginity. And there are women who basically walk around.
They do it for a good reason, particularly in the mountain country. They are pressured when they are very young to marry.
Yeah.
And their parents, fathers mostly, will kind of negotiate their marriage. It's one of those sort of old school things, and to avoid that, that's what happens in this movie.
Yeah.
To avoid that pressure, this young woman takes the sworn oath, and then many years later decides
she wants to be a woman again.
Yeah, and goes to the city.
And it's how she sort of is able to restart her life and reinvent her identity. It's really a fascinating movie, and done in a very, very a very kind of cinema, very taste style, right? Very kind of like Romanian cinema. So it's worth checking out. It really is Sworn Virgin, a very interesting film that was at the Berlin Film Festival just last year. And really, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's really it's a sharp film. This is my pick of the week. I just want to thank the people at Film Movement for finally filling in the longest vacant blank on my must-have list. Honestly, the first year that I went to the Cannes Film Festival, you and I were writing. This is 1992. We were writing for Entertainment Today, and you remember how I did that. And Entertainment Today did not pay us anything. Tim was freelancing because he turned down the job that I eventually accepted, and boy did I regret that. So I was working in the office, and the suggestion, can you pay for me to go to Cannes? Boy, what boisterous laughter that was met with. So I was able to finagle my way over to the Cannes Film Festival, and this was my first year there, and it was one of the first films I saw. While I was there, I became very close friends with some Swedish journalists that I'm still friends with today, and so there was a Swedish mood going on, and Billy August, who was Danish, had directed The Best Intentions, which was in competition, and The Best Intentions was a 3-hour-long look at the romance of Ingmar Bergman's parents, scripted by Ingmar Bergman, but directed by Billy August.
Mostly set in the early 1900s.
Pretty much, yeah. Turn of the century, about 1909-ish. Yeah. And I remember sitting there with my Swedish friends, and I cried my eyes out. It is the most gut-wrenching. I mean, you realize why Bergman became such a great dramatist, because he was born into a romance that was just dramatic in every in all of its extremities. An extraordinary film, one of the most extraordinary films I've ever seen. It is 3 hours that just blows by rapidly. It is so beautifully done in every way. And
you know what's interesting with the other film? It's a 3-hour film, a film about Ingmar Bergman's family, written by Ingmar. Yet it is in no way, shape, or form a Bergman film.
Not at all.
It's a Billy August film.
Very much so. Very true.
Which, in people who know Bergman films will understand what I mean by that. There's a certain sort of...
Yes.
So this is not a Bergman film.
No.
It's a Billy August film about so it's very fascinating in that way.
And Pernilla August, who won Best Actress for it, of course, the director's wife, but they were not husband and wife. They met on this film. So, and she's magnificent as well. So I cannot recommend this enough. It is a wondrous, wondrous film. The Blu-ray is just beyond compare. This film has never been on DVD, never been on Blu-ray, never been on VHS. In 24 years, this thing has never been out in any form whatsoever, not in streaming, not nothing. No one has been able to see this film in 24 years.
Wow.
So I recommend that you get this Blu-ray. Please get this and savor it. It is you will not regret it. It is wonderful. It also includes the 1984 short film Karin's Face by Ingmar Bergman, which also has never, ever been available in North America, and a Peter Cowie essay. So it's thin on extras, but what a movie. What an amazing movie. All right, and that does it for the foreign stuff. So let's get in now to our classic film segment, and this is where we are going to treat you to a very interesting interview that we recently conducted. We had a lot of comments on the Facebook page about people loving the releases from Film Detective, the Blu-ray classic releases of films that normally would have been out on from really crappy DVD public domain companies in the past, and suddenly a lot of these movies that have never really gotten proper releases are getting great Blu-ray releases from Film Detective. So with all of those comments on the Facebook page, people were asking more about Film Detective, and I thought, all right, it's time that we reach out to the Film Detective and see what makes that company tick. So we reached out to them, and Phil Hopkins, who runs Film Detective, along with his colleague Don Stradley, agreed to talk to us. And Phil Hopkins has been with a number of companies previously, so I've worked with Phil for years, and he's one of those guys that just loves movies and knows a lot about movies and takes a great deal of care with movies. And he and Don Stradley are doing a wonderful, wonderful job over there and creating a new company that is filling in a lot of blanks and a lot of gaps in people's collections. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Phil Hopkins and Don Stradley of the Film Detective.
All right, it is a wonderful hot day in July, and I'm avoiding the heat by sitting inside and talking to Phil Hopkins and Don Stradley from the Film Detective. Thanks for talking to us, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have been covering your stuff for quite some time, and we had a posting on our Facebook page from one of our listeners who thanked us for mentioning your titles, had purchased 2 titles, and was elated and was going to go dig through your library and wanted to know more about the company in general. And Phil, you've been through a number of different companies. We've worked with you for years in various incarnations. Could both of you talk a little bit about what the philosophy, the grounding philosophy for the Film Detective is, and how the company came into existence?
Well, we're elated that your colleague and friend was elated to discover us. That's wonderful news and greatly appreciated. The challenge, obviously, in this market right now is with digital emerging and physical product being challenged to get into retail and have something that's sold. You really have to kind of have something that's an improvement on what one can purchase out there in the world of home video. So our philosophy has been, since we started 2.5 years ago, is with the home video and the DVDs and Blu-rays that we're releasing to try to do things that haven't been done yet. And that includes releasing the movies in their correct aspect ratio, which is something that was overlooked by a number of players in the industry for many years. That's something that we're spending a lot of time to get right, and consulting with people like Bob Furmanek, who are authorities in projection of proper aspect ratios, and trying to source good material, which has always been a challenge when it comes to releasing public domain movies. Those sort of are the things that we're paying extra close attention to, and then certainly having great editorial with the likes of Don Stradley.
Well, Don, you any thoughts? Yeah.
Well, one thing I was going to add, and Phil can correct me if I'm off base, but I think there are still people out there who get very excited about DVDs and Blu-rays, even though streaming is likely the wave of the future. Like you said, there was someone you knew who was very happy about what we were doing, and I think that's maybe it's the last wave or the second to last wave, but people are still interested in having a disc that they can hold in their hand and compare it to other discs. I think that's where we fit in too.
Well, it is definitely, our listeners are very much into the joy and the satisfaction of ownership, having that thing in your hand and knowing that there's not a giant digital pipeline that separates you from the movie that you want to watch, and if your internet goes down, then,
Exactly.
you're out of luck. The titles that you guys have released, the one that really kind of lit us up and lit a lot of people up was Kansas City Confidential, which is just such a great classic. How did that sort of fall on your radar?
Well, it's certainly one of my favorite noir titles, and we got the treat to actually see it on the big screen last month. Don was on hand for the exhibition at a local theater where we live here north of Boston in Beverly, Massachusetts. We had a theatrical screening off of the high def file, which just looked incredibly stunning on a big screen in an old theater. So that was a real treat, was to see something theatrically. And the investment to get to that resolution and spend as much time and money to get it restored, you forget, because so many people are kind of in the box, if you will, or they're watching things sort of on a tablet or a computer. To see something blown up in full resolution and to see the film like that was really a big treat. So we're doing it again this Wednesday with the Red House, and noir titles tend to, we have a soft spot for them. Don has written for Cinema Retro and other publications over the years, so those tend to get a lot of excitement. Kansas City Confidential had again been previously released, and we felt that one of the biggest criticisms in the market was the fact that it had so much noise reduction, which is something that gets used to hide grain, and broadcasters tended to use it over the years. That was something that would remove artifacts, and we learned over the past few years that consumers want to see it as it would be projected off of film, meaning as much grain as possible. So we spent extra care when we were doing the restoration on that to remove scratches and debris and various audio pups and whatnot, but to leave all of the grain, to not touch it, to not artificially remove any of that stuff, because we realized that the true fan of Blu-ray, they're looking to get as much information off of that film as possible. And when you have Blu-ray, you can get full resolution off of the 35 millimeter. So that's exactly what we did, and we've been thrilled with the response, and we're trying to replicate that with our next few releases.
And, I want to talk for a second about a couple of other films that I have a great fondness for. The Terror being the first one, which you just recently released, and which I have a little bit of connection to because there was a documentary about 15 years ago that I co-produced called The Schlock, The Secret History of American Movies, where we talk about the Terror, and we sat down with Dick Miller, who gave us a lot of great behind-the-scenes stories about it. And in the process of putting that doc together, we were trolling through a lot of source material trying to get some good-looking pieces of the Terror. And I think, we finally found some pieces that we were happy with, but I still don't feel like I really saw the film until your Blu-ray came out. And suddenly I felt like I saw it for the first time.
Thank you.
Really,
That's wonderful to hear.
Really, just incredible. It just brought it to life. I imagine the way that it actually looked, when it was first released. Talk for a second about the challenges, because I know what we went through. Could you talk about what you go through and how you deal? You said a little bit about cleaning up and restoration, but finding those source materials for public domain titles is such a needle in a haystack effort, and sometimes a lot of companies just don't see the value in it. You guys do such an incredible job. Do you have a magical formula for what you do?
I wish we did. We would be able to share the magic with everyone in the way of having pay increases for underpaid staff, including myself. We tend to work with collectors, and we tend to work with folks like the Library of Congress and UCLA and other institutions that house film. We have a film archive ourselves that we sort of try to take care of and make sure that whatever material we keep in storage is worth keeping in storage, and trying to not pay storage fees for something that's going to be never used. There's all sorts of collectors out there that are very paranoid for good reason when it comes to public domain movies. In the day of ripping, if one has a digital file of a film, and if it's PD, that's a sure way of having prized possession get out there in a BitTorrent for the whole world to see.
Right.
It's a tricky place to navigate, and certainly studios and home video companies tend to have less interest when releasing public domain movies. We happen to like the challenge. I have always felt that the public domain is an underserved, underappreciated area that doesn't fully get understood to the advantages of having those resources available when you can find good material. But at the same time, I always say if we could get access to a studio negative or a studio print of a PD film, that's a much better scenario if you could do that. That would require, though, the studios opening up their vaults to us and having the funds to cover the amount of money they'd be probably looking to receive to justify that. And
Right.
when you look at the return on that, the economics don't always add up. At some point, I'd like to think that Film Detective could go through all the studio vaults and have a lot of material that we could be involved with that they would see less value in. Because that usually is what happens with public domain. If you look at the sort of history of how public domain ends up into home video, it's often the case like It's a Wonderful Life. There were many years where that film was sold by 10 home video companies until Aaron Spelling was able to come up with a way to perfect a copyright on something that even is debatable today. But what it means is that there's a one source of good material and you're not getting subpar versions of it. That works for consumers and for us as film fans. But if a film's not coming out, in the case of The Terror, that hadn't been released, and we have access to material, and we make a judgment call and say at some point, do we release it? Is it going to get released properly? We're not trying to discourage the studios, but at the same time, we like the films, we like the material, and if we have an audience who appreciates it, then we're thrilled and we can continue to do what we do.
Let's talk for a second about Dementia 13, which I just had a look at, and after slugging through about a decade's worth of at least 20 or 30 really terrible releases of that, I think I had 5 on my shelf on DVD at one point, and none of them they were just all kind of an eyesore. This thing is, once again, it's a revelation. I mean, you really, really did a number on it. Where did you get the source materials, and what exactly did you do to sort of restore that early Francis Coppola artifact to its original glory?
Well, unfortunately, we didn't get access to the negative. We did get an email the other day from American Zoetrope's archivist asking us if, in fact, we had located the missing negative, which is still missing as far as we know. We were fortunate to have a release print, which is the majority of what we've used to date to release our titles. And this was something, again, that had it had fairly decent resolution, and we were able to get a good scan from it. It's, in my opinion, it's the best I've ever seen it, and I think that if it ever gets discovered to find the negative in an archive or a vault, then that will be fantastic. But from my perspective, the 3 months that we worked on restoring it, both sound as well as picture quality, we're very happy with how that came out. So thank you, and I appreciate both the kind words you have told me about The Terror and Dementia 13, 2 films that are from my childhood, and certainly I'm sure Don's and yours. You know, these were on late night TV and bargain bin videos, and we knew of them because of the public domain. And you look at the history of being able to get any copy of a movie, whether it's on VHS or DVD. I remember getting catalogs from Something Weird and Sinister Cinema and Chiller and all the folks who are still around in business.
Yep.
And it's because of companies like that, and that we have an appreciation for catalog movies that probably wouldn't see studio releases. And those companies, I think, are really the champions of the cult movies and the esoteric movies and the B poverty row pictures that we're celebrating those titles. And now with technology and hopefully with some more luck in finding good prints, we'll continue to carry on that tradition of releasing films in a resolution that's going to have the that audience want to repurchase them again. And I know I happen to have 2 or 3 versions of different movies in my collection. Every time I see a better version, a good example of that is White Zombie. I probably have 4 copies of White Zombie in my library.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, and I went through that, like I said, with Dementia 13 and The Terror as well. You just keep picking up every next release of it on DVD, hoping that one of them will really be the one. And I think what you guys are doing is you're finally giving film collectors a chance to say, "I've got the one, and that's it, and I don't need to look for this anymore." What other titles can in the coming months can we tease our listeners with? What else do you have in the pipeline that we can announce?
Well, I believe next month we're going to be putting out Patterns, which is the old Rod Serling classic from the 50s, which was a TV drama, then it was a big screen drama, and it's been through the public domain grind for a number of years. And I think this is going to be another great addition to add along to The Terror and Dementia 13 as another public domain movie that finally looks good and sounds good, because the sound is a problem with a lot of those movies too.
Yeah, we forget that the audio sometimes is in even worse condition than the picture, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and what I'm hoping is all the people who bought all of those huge collections of 100 DVDs for $10 in a box at your local drugstore, which was sort of a craze for a while. Hopefully they all got tired of those really horrible sounding discs and will come out and look for movies like Patterns and Dementia 13.
Well, it's great work you guys are doing. It really is. What does the future look? And I'll wrap it up with this. I mean, you talked a little bit about the obviously the way that things are drifting now towards streaming, but there clearly continues to be a demand for physical product. Do you see that this is going to bifurcate, that a certain kind of movie is going to be a streamable movie and another kind will be a collectible movie, or is that line going to be kind of blurred? And what's going to happen? Do you have a crystal ball?
I wish I did. If I would certainly include you in the lotto drawing if we had that. The information that we're being told, obviously, is the digital revolution has happened. If that was the case, I think there'd be no home video sales at all. And so, fortunately, there's still the hardcore collectors and cinephiles that appreciate what it takes to get a Blu-ray or a DVD into the marketplace. I think what we're going to have to do is kind of raise the bar a bit over the next few months and start to look to produce supplemental information. The one area that we know we're lacking in is our ability to produce supplemental features, and that's something we're going to start working on later over the next 3 to 6 months, and having enough time in advance to produce supplemental features. And then as we grow the library, we're going to be launching a streaming platform of our movies as well as our editorial. We have a local movie host here in Boston named Dana Hersey, who's signed on to be our voice of the Film Detective streaming channel. So we will have a streaming service which will be on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV. It will be on the web. And it will essentially be our library and possibly some other collectors' libraries that we distribute. And that will be an area that we hope will gain some tracking as we continue to try to release more titles and finance the restoration.
Well, you guys keep doing the great work that you're doing. It is definitely appreciated. We appreciate it, and our listeners really appreciate it. And you are helping a lot of collectors fill a lot of holes and plug a lot of blanks in their collections. So it is really appreciated. So thank you again for talking to us, and good luck going forward.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. There are the guys. So that's what makes the Film Detective tick. And with that, we now move into what I was mentioning, Dementia 13. the old Francis Coppola film that has just been destroyed with so many horrible public domain DVD releases that a lot of people just don't even bother anymore. This is from 1963. Can you believe Francis Coppola directed a movie in 1963? It's like this is almost a decade before The Godfather. This is when he was, sowing his seeds. And,
Roger Corman and all that business.
Oh my gosh!
I was 2, so
Well, anyway, it is a fascinating look at Coppola evolving as a filmmaker, kind of putting all the pieces together, and it continues to be a weird, creepy, and really cool cult film, black and white, 75 minutes long. It's been out a million times, but this is the first time it's really ever been out. I will say the Francis Coppola Roger Corman collaboration, Dementia 13, a really extraordinary piece of film history that is finally out in a Blu-ray release, courtesy of the Film Detective, and it's gorgeous and it looks right, and they have done right by a film that everybody else has done wrong by for so long. So well done, guys. Keep up the good work, and very, very happy to have this. So keep collecting those Film Detective releases. They will keep coming out. All right, Tim. So, on other classics here.
Well, one that I truly love. We're sitting in my spacious studio here in Pasadena, which I like to call Marengo House, where I only have 2 movie posters. They're right behind me.
Yep.
One is El Ansia, which is also known as The Hunger. That happens to be the Argentine lobby poster for that, which is why it's called El Ansia. The other one is a poster for Dalton Trumbo movie about the documentary about Trumbo called Trumbo. That's the other one because it's Dalton Trumbo over there. I have in my hand The Brave One, which of course is written by Dalton Trumbo. An extraordinary Irving Rapper film because it's about so much. It's a film ostensibly about a little boy trying to save his bull. From being slain by the greatest matador in Mexico. That's ostensibly what the film is about, but it's about so much more. And it's a beautiful film too. I remember this film, that color, that beautiful.
That Technicolor era when everything just popped.
Oh, the reds and the blues, and it's just beautiful. A little melodramatic by today's standards, certainly, but I absolutely adore this film. CinemaScope. What do we have here? Do we have any special features on this? Special features include an isolated score track, the score by Victor Young, and a French audio track.
There we go.
Yeah, French audio track. I love it. I love it when that happens. Anyway, The Brave One, Irving Rapper's film, fantastic.
Daughter of Dawn is another great release from our good friends at Milestone. They do. Amy and Dennis over there at Milestone do such an amazing job. It's important to understand that what people in their position do, the people who do the work of archivists and digging up these obscure little movies that are important that nobody else will bother with, it's a labor of love, and it is not easy, and it is not cheap, and I just cannot applaud them enough. They're just amazing people, and I love them to death. This is an incredible movie. The Daughter of Dawn is significant for a lot of reasons. For starters, it was made in 1920, and it was the first and the only film for a long time that had an all-Native American cast. Not people dressed up as Native Americans, pretending to be Native Americans. Not Iron Eyes.
Chuck Heston.
Yeah, not Natalie Wood pretending to be a Native American girl, and not Iron Eyes Cody, who's actually Italian, fooling us right into the 70s. None of that. No, this was absolutely straight up a 100% Native American cast. And it was shot by a first-time director, entirely on location in the mountains of Oklahoma, by a guy named Norbert Miles. It is really an incredible kind of ethnographic artifact. It's amazing. And this was considered lost for almost a century. They found it over at the Oklahoma Historical Society and completely restored it. Gave it a whole new score track, and what a wonderful, wonderful movie it is. It captures Native American life in a way that no film since would be able to, because in 1920 you're still close to that moment when everything was lost, when the Industrial Revolution and reservations and just the growth of the United States and everything else sort of squeezed the last remnants of Native American indigenous society. And a lot of the people here certainly would remember it, or they would have parents who remembered it. They're connected to it in a way that you're not going to get with any subsequent film. So, the depiction of, their lives, their daily lives, their loves, it's essentially kind of a romantic triangle in a way, the story. It's not narratively anything that's amazing, but just in terms of what it depicts and the people in it and the historical role that it plays. It's an amazing movie. So The Daughter of Dawn on Blu-ray from Milestone, absolutely wonderful, must-have.
That sounds absolutely amazing. In 1955, Orson Welles made a British documentary television series. There are only about 6 or 7 episodes of it. It's called Around the World with Orson Welles. It's a fantastic, fantastic series. And I remember, at least growing up in St. Louis anyway, in the, I'm going to say late 60s, early 70s, for whatever reason, this series used to come on. I remember it specifically would come on right after The Avengers, another British ABC British television series, The Avengers with John Steed, Emma Peel, that whole kind of thing. I would watch that, and then I would watch this. This was fantastic. It was Orson Welles more or less taking us on a sort of like travel log of Europe. And we would wander around Europe. He would take us to great places, introduce us to extraordinary people of the day, Greco, Cocteau. These people who say these names. He just knew these people.
That was his scene.
It was just his scene. He just go talk to John Cocteau. Hey, John,
that's great.
What are you doing, man?
That's great.
And it was very much like that. It was he wrote every episode of this, but it was very much like he was just wandering around, running into people.
That's great.
And narrated fantastic, beautiful black and white photography. Orson Welles, Around the World with Orson Welles, a complete series. All kinds of fantastic stuff on this, including a little bit of behind-the-scenes stuff.
And that's from B2MP, by the way.
Yeah.
We're starting to review some stuff from B2MP, who does a lot of great stuff, and we're happy to be doing that. And one of their other releases is A Slipper in the Rose, the Cinderella movie with Richard Chamberlain, and with songs by the Sherman Brothers, Mary Poppins and everything else that Disney ever did. This is rarely seen, actually. This is from 1975. Kind of a Brian Forbes, the great British director, directed this, and it kind of, it faded for a moment, and it's so good to have it back on Blu-ray. It really, really is just absolutely wonderfully put together. The songs are great. Chamberlain's fantastic. Supporting performances, well, not even supporting, but the rest of the cast. It is after all a Cinderella story. It's not about the prince. Jim McCraven, Edith Evans, and Michael Hordern. It's really, really good. So, especially in light of the recent Cinderella, the Kenneth Branagh Cinderella, the non-musical Disney Cinderella.
Yeah.
It's nice to have another live action one to refer to from a different era, and it's just beautiful. It's terrific.
I have the pretty extraordinary Joseph Anthony Robert Duvall film tomorrow, based on the Faulkner short story and the Gordon Foote play. So this would have been Joseph Anthony directed The Rainmaker. And this would have been his last film, 1972. So this capped off his career. Interesting. The Faulkner. Nobody reads Faulkner anymore. I had a hell of a English literature teacher when I was in high school. He made us read all this stuff. In the Faulkner, this is the story of a farmer who takes in this pregnant woman, and he takes care of the pregnant woman, and the woman dies and has the baby and dies, and he takes care of the baby, and all kinds of things happen. This is a very profound and dark, fairly tragic. Most of it is told from the point of view of the trial. And the interesting thing about the Faulkner is that the woman that the Robert Duvall character takes in was black in the Faulkner.
Yeah.
Foote makes her white, and she's white in this movie, but in the Faulkner she was black.
Isn't that interesting?
It added an entirely different level to this story. It's still a very powerful thing. Look, Robert Duvall at any point in his career, this is 1972. Robert Duvall, can't go wrong with Robert Duvall.
No.
Gorgeous and important film, kind of in the mode of that sort of Mice and Men. Sort of John Ford sort of storytelling style, even though it was made in 1972.
Abel Ferrara, guy who never fails to just disappoint and shock. His films are always so interesting. This is the most unusual movie he probably ever made. This is Napoli, 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 otherwise known as Naples, Naples, Naples. And Abel Ferrara, a guy who really wrestles with his Italian heritage and his Catholic heritage, and all these things are sort of big, they're thorns in all of his movies. And he trips over them, and he wants you to trip over them. And this is fascinating. It is allegedly based in fact, although it's hard to sort of figure out quite how and to what degree. But it is this is basically a docudrama about a woman who sort of is your mythical vehicle through all of the stuff that's going on in Naples, Italy. And it is a troubling, beautiful, poetic, and strange and kind of hypnotic film in many respects. And, Naples is a movie that has a certain historical significance, not just anciently, but as recently as World War II.
Yeah.
And really sort of at the epicenter of a lot of significant international geopolitical stuff within the last century. In any case, this is really, really a kind of a fascinating movie, and I'd love to know sort of what realistic part of it this was inspired here. But in any case, you get an illustrated booklet, and that's essentially it. There's not much else by way of extras, but this is from Raro Video, a certain line of that's distributed by Kino, and it's on Blu-ray.
I've got the collector's edition, The Return of the Living Dead.
Yes.
One of 3 films that Dan O'Bannon directed, 1985 film. Dan O'Bannon, of course, we associate Dan with Alien.
Alien, for sure.
Forever.
A lot of genre films from the 80s, basically.
He wrote a whole bunch of them, only directed 3. The Return of the Living Dead was one of the ones he directed. So he took that sort of George A. Romero, Night of the Living Dead, sort of very serious, obviously black and white, some people say socially relevant social commentary film. Some people say it's not a social commentary film. He and Russo and all those guys did, and he made this film, which is really, really a very silly film. This is a spoof of many of the things that were going on, and he actually gives reason for the zombies. The goofy kids do something; they release a gas into the air, and the gas is what reanimates all the dead people and stuff like that. So he took it in an entirely different direction for this 1985 film. But I got to tell you, this stuff is still a lot of fun, and zombies still plaguing us to this day.
Yeah,
to this very day, the zombies are freaking everywhere. This is a slow zombie movie, by the way. You got fast zombies or slow zombies. They were still working with slow zombies,
which I prefer because they're creepier to me in many ways.
Yeah. Who needs? I don't need a fast ass zombie running at me. That's disgusting.
So I'm gonna go quickly through a few things here. I got a couple of double features. One from Shout Factory. The first one from Shout Factory is Grey Eagle and Winter Hawk, Great American Frontier double feature. Neither of these are particularly great, but they have kind of a kitsch factor. These are programmers. And you get them to kind of just throw on in the background and sort of, enjoy. Ben Johnson is in Grey Eagle, and Ben Johnson's good, workman-like guy. The only reason to see Winterhawk is because Don Wells is in it, and pretty much anything Don Wells is in is great. Woody Strode and Denver Pyle also show up in this, so, there's a lot of familiar Western faces, although Don Wells is not really famous for Westerns. She's Mary Ann.
Yeah. Oh, man. Don't even get me... now I'm all dizzy and everything. You mentioned Mary Ann, I go dizzy.
And then Christopher Lee and Klaus Kinski made a couple of movies in 1966 and 67, borderline exploitation movies, also kind of programmers. And those are thrown together on a Blue Underground double feature of Circus of Fear and 5 Golden Dragons. The Circus of Fear is the more interesting one here. It's it's nominally an exploitation film. It's not very fearful, but it's kind of a spooky horror film from the mid '60s, and it has a wonderful commentary by the director, John Moxey, which is worth the price all by itself. It's that alone is really quite entertaining and very interesting.
I've always been a big fan of Jeremy Irons, particularly young Jeremy Irons is fantastic. I have this film Moonlighting here,
not to be confused with the television
Bruce
series.
Willis and Sybil Shepherd and all that, which I love too, actually. But this is a really neat film. This film's 1982 film. This film won Best Screenplay at Cannes in 1982.
Wow. Okay.
It's a really neat film set during that period when Poland was just sort of going through all this Lech Walesa and solidarity and all of that was going on. This is about these Polish construction workers who go to London. They were importing workers into London to do all of the sort of work because the population of the UK has been dwindling.
Oh yeah,
UK citizens have literally been dwindling for almost 35 years now. It's really just this all works back to that Brexit thing that's going on right now. This is all related material. I got something dinging around over here. Anyway, this movie sort of speaks to all of that stuff, and how that Thatcher era business is still playing out today.
Absolutely.
That talk, Miss May, who just got elected, Thatcher 2, basically what it is. Some of the sort of rhetoric of her and Thatcher play out in this film. So it's an interesting film. Audio commentary with Jeremy Irons. The film is Moonlighting. The director is Jerzy Slomowiski.
Yes. Yeah. And then a couple from Flickr Alley, from their manufacture on demand Blu-ray burn line. I guess BDR is what we would be calling these. 5 American experimental films of the 1950s, and then The Ghost That Never Returns by Abram Room. These are from the Black Hawk Films collection, the films that are curated and preserved by David Shepard. The films are Abstract and Concrete from 1952. From 1952 and 53, the Jim Davis films Analogies and Color Dances. And then Treadle and Bobbin by Wheaton Galantine from 1954. And then lastly, New York, New York, or NY by Francis Thompson, which is sort of filmed all through the 40s and the 50s, and which is really unbelievable. Shot with a very special camera, the Kodak Cine Special camera, which had all these mirrors and weird kaleidoscopic attachments and stuff. Really interesting bunch of films. And then The Ghost That Never Returns is a 1930 film that it sort of represents this very... it comes on the tail end of that classic Soviet cinema period of Eisenstein and Dziga Vertov and all of that, but it is very, very different from all of that. This is the same director, by the way, Abram Room, who did Bed and Sofa, and which is also available from Flickr Alley, and it is really kind of a strange, early talky experimental that has very gritty and kind of realistic in a way that Soviet films of the era were not. So that's definitely worth checking out. The Ghost That Never Returns.
I've got a one from the 30s too. Frank Capra film, Lady for a Day.
Oh, I love this.
It's a lovely film, sort of light Frank Capra film. Annie Apple, she's this indigent woman in New York, and her daughter. She's been telling her daughter that she's sort of an aristocratic high society sort of girl, and her daughter's going to come. She has the Spanish ambassador and all of this, and this guy, this sort of dandy, who considers her sort of like a luck charm, sets her up in a nice apartment and basically makes her look like she's the high society person. It plays out all of those sort of Frank Capra tropes about class and all that kind of stuff. Lovely film, a lot of fun. This one has special features, includes an essay from film historian Scott Eyman and a commentary track from Frank Capra Jr. Neat
Beautiful.
movie. Yeah.
Nice.
Lady for a Day.
3 from the Kino Lorber Studio Classics line. All of them worth checking out, really. I thought we had covered this actually once before, but this may be out again. Where's Papa with George Segal and Ruth Gordon. This is actually a lot of fun. Ruth Gordon, when she stopped being a screenwriter and started being an actress, really just kind of it's a whole new ball of wax, as everybody knows who's ever seen any of her performance. Rosemary's Baby and Harold and Maude. Anyway, Carl Reiner directed this 1970, one of his early directing efforts, and a lot of interesting performances show up in here. Paul Sorvino, Garrett Morris, Barnard Hughes, Ron Liebman, a lot of people who go on to have great careers on television. Cuba with Sean Connery and Brooke Adams, kind of it's sort of in some respects a silly movie in hindsight, especially now all the things that are going on with Cuba. But you know what? It's perfectly fine. It takes place around the 1959 Cuban Revolution, and Sean Connery is this is shot in 1979, by the way, so it's well after Bond for him, except for Never Say Never Again, but it's him trying to sort of do a Bondish thing as a mercenary who's up to all kinds of antics in revolutionary Cuba. Brooke Adams is wonderful, directed by Richard Lester, very uncharacteristic film for him with a great score by Patrick Williams. And then 5 Miles to Midnight with Sophia Loren and Anthony Perkins, which is one of those really super cool Anthony Perkins creep fests from the 1960s, 1963, produced and directed by Anatole Litvak, and really an uncharacteristic film for Sophia Loren, to be honest. I mean, it's perfect for Anthony Anthony Perkins. It's not so much for her, but anyway, they play a. It's about a couple who have this plan to sort of get rich very quickly, and naturally, of course, things wind up going incredibly badly. But very, very, it's still a cool film from the era. It's got a great vibe.
I have got the crush here. Alicia Silverstone, 1993. This movie was. I did the junket for this movie.
Gosh.
I say that all the time on this show, dude. I've been doing this shit too long, just too long. 1993. I did the crush for this. Carrie Elway, Alicia Silverstone. She's this 14-year-old girl. She gets this crush on Carrie Elway's. He's a journalist or whatever the heck he is in the movie, and it's like one of these. This is just all wrong kind of things. The thing of it is, he doesn't really do anything. He in fact rebukes her romantic advances, and then she crushes them. Indeed, I thought the double entendre of that title was always pretty good. Alicia Silverstone, guess what year she was born in?
Oh gosh, 80.
1976, baby. She's 40.
Oh wow.
Now all the things I used to think about her 25 years ago are perfectly okay. The crush.
Oh, that's great. 3 from the Warner Archive collection, as we're rounding down here. A couple of them on just regular DVD-Rs, and then one of them on Blu-ray, which is just to die for. The ones on DVD-R, the regular manufacturer-on-demand titles. One is Jack of Diamonds with George Hamilton. George Hamilton when he was a movie star.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's George Hamilton, Joseph Cotton, Marie Laforêt, and Maurice Evans. Jack of Diamonds is basically, I guess, it's somewhere in the. It's the George Hamilton version of It Takes a Thief crossed with the Thomas Crown Affair.
That's a really, really good movie. One of the things in that movie is this, because the reason why he gets hired is because he's gorgeous.
Yeah,
and they need a pretty man to pull off this thing.
Yeah.
So that's the point of his thing. And the thing. I remember a scene in that movie where he does something wrong, and one of the bad guys has got to rough him up a bit.
Yeah.
And the guy says, "Don't hit him in the face." And I'm like, man, I don't think I had seen a movie to that point before that was so pointed about the necessity of the guy being pretty.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, any of these kind of sophisticated criminal cat burglar / thief movies are just a lot of fun from this era, and there were a lot of them. But the supporting cast here is just fantastic. Not only Joseph Cotton, but I mean, Zsa Zsa Gabor shows up in this thing. Carol Baker shows up. It's a lot of fun. It's a great classy movie. And then Count the Hours with Teresa Wright, who can do no wrong by me. It's just done. And MacDonald Carey, who's always fun. But Teresa Wright could just show up in a movie and just sit there for 2 hours, and I'd be perfectly fine.
So beautiful.
She's just amazing. Even when you get to Somewhere in Time, where she's an old woman, she captures that movie. She's just magnificent. Anyway, this was directed by none other than Don Siegel. The Don Siegel who would go on to do so many great Clint Eastwood westerns and actioners like Dirty Harry.
The Don Siegel who taught Clint Eastwood how to direct. I mean, Sergio Leone, yes, but Don Siegel taught Clint Eastwood how to direct.
Yes.
Make no mistake about it.
Well, this is kind of a pseudo noir. There's a murder. And then it gets a little procedural. I won't give you any of the twists and turns. It's kind of hard to sort of talk about who does what and can't do what because of what. But as far as sort of noirish procedural courtroom drama crime films, this is actually one of the better ones that came out of that particular Hollywood era. So it's really, really fun. Uncounted thrills, it says on the poster. Count the hours. Uncounted Thrills, Count the Hours. And then on Blu-ray from the Warner Archive collection, this is the gem this week, The Unsinkable Molly Brown, starring Debbie Reynolds. This is their Blu-ray, one of those occasional Blu-rays we get out of the Warner Archive collection, but they're coming more and more. And Molly Brown, of course, as everyone knows, was on the Titanic, right?
She didn't sing.
She didn't sing.
Yeah.
So she played by Kathy Bates in James Cameron's film. Not so here. Much more engaging casting here with Debbie Reynolds. And this is what Meredith Willson did after The Music Man, and it's a delight, and it is so colorful, and it's so beautiful, and it looks so good on Blu-ray, and Debbie Reynolds is so great, and they have a behind-the-scenes documentary here which is just absolutely wonderful as well. So, directed by the great Charles Walters, who is second only to Vincent Minnelli, as far as I'm concerned, as directors of great musicals. Charles Walters also did, Lily. Fantastic director, wonderful movie.
I've got Roller Coaster here. I'm looking at this box. I got stuck in the box for a second. 1977, right? I remember this movie because I actually went to see this movie in 1977 when it came out, and it was actually pretty damn good. It's a movie about a guy who's blackmailing all of these cities, threatening to sabotage these roller coasters all over the country, and he does. He sabotages a few. It's a very, very good movie, directed by James Goldstone. Is it Goldstone? Yes,
Goldstone.
James Goldstone. Neat movie. Check it out if you get a chance. Nothing particular on this. You got an interview with the writer Tommy Cook.
Perfect. All right, that is it, guys. We are done this week. Mark will be back next week, and if you have anything you want to send us, Vox boxes, questions, you name it, send them to gods@digigods.com. We'll see you then.